My dad paused for the longest time. I wasn't necessarily sure what was going to happen next. We had had some serious fights in the past. I figured we were in a public place, so I kind of thought we'd keep it tame, but I didn't know. And as if in slow motion, I still remember, he took his fork, set it down from dinner, took a sip of his drink, and then he looked at me with something I hadn't seen in his eyes, maybe ever. Welcome back to the Sunshine Cafe, where we pour positive back into your day, sharing stories from real people who have made it through some real struggles, but were able to restore their health, hope, and peace. I'm Lisa Roers, your host, and as a certified coach, I'm here to guide you to be your best self-advocate, to help you restore your health, ignite your faith, and conquer those fears while you navigate your own healing journey so you can eventually exchange your dis-ease for durability. If you're looking for hope and encouragement to live a life you love, then you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Sunshine Cafe. I'm Lisa Roers, your host, and woohoo! Today's episode is all about relationships. Because relationships are affected by the human condition. And sometimes you need a relationship reset. And if you're listening or watching this right now and you've never had a problem with relationships, I'm going to guess that you're either like 3 or 4 years old, or you're one of those really, really rare people who have just never had a misunderstanding or a miscommunication or a conflict or something that went sideways in your relationship with people. I'm talking about relationships with brothers, sisters, husbands, wives, nieces, nephews, grandparents, mothers, fathers, bosses, coworkers, and friends. My goodness. Back in my sales days, I'd often joke with my friends that work would be really easy if I just didn't have to deal with people. But when you really stop and think about it, there are countless ways that the words that we say can come out sideways. My husband and I talk about this a lot with our son because communication can be just really complicated. And we forget, dare I say, even usually forget, how the words we throw out there are landing on the person across from us in the conference room or at the kitchen table. I think it'd be really difficult to learn English. I mean, just forget all the acronyms and stuff that we use every single day when we text and email. Just think about like a simple sentence. You put the emphasis on a different word and all of a sudden the entire sentence has a completely different meaning. You work hard, suggesting others don't. You work so hard, which suggests that maybe you don't do other things with the same kind of gusto. You work so hard, or you work so hard, really kind of suggesting that the person really does work hard and that person is actually kind of complimenting you. So yeah, it's easy to see how communication can come out sideways, or how people might misinterpret something you said, 100% unintentionally. Language just has a whole lot of, shall we say, wiggle room. So then, why do we have relationship issues? Well, from my experience, it's usually because of pride, myself included. And maybe I'm the biggest offender in this category. But it's hard for anybody to admit that they're wrong. Saving face as a human being, not wanting to be embarrassed or not wanting others to lose respect for you, boil all down, all of those things come down to pride. And pride is a real human shortcoming. And there's not enough grace. None of us give the benefit of the doubt often enough. We don't assume the best intention of the person's communication. We jump to, it's all about me, instead of handing out abundant helpings of grace and forgiveness for any time things come out sideways. Grace, forgiveness, assuming the best intentions, believing the best in others. These are all biblical principles. Not everybody wants those kinds of principles, or at least they don't want to know that they're biblical, but they are biblical. I have an example of this right now happening in my life. I have a friend, and I've worked with them for many, many years. I sent them multiple messages asking if we could talk. I'm not sure why, but I'm not getting any response. It's just crickets on the other side. I text, nothing back. I leave a message, nothing back. So, with the utmost humility, I acknowledge that whether I'm aware of it or not, I must have done something wrong. Something that offended them or hit them sideways. And I'm really sorry, truly, for whatever it was that I said that might have offended them or somehow made this person not want to communicate with me. I don't know exactly what it was. It most definitely was a miscommunication because I did not and would not intentionally say something to offend or hurt this person. I really like this person. And I really like being friends with them. So I sent another message. I asked this person to please forgive me. And if they would, please give me a call back so we could discuss it. And yet, I hear crickets. But people are really conflict avoidant. Some people are especially conflict avoidant. And they'd rather stuff all of their anger and frustration and whatever inside and never have it see the light of day than just simply having a conversation to clear up the misunderstanding. Now, that's one thing I don't really understand. I'm not saying it's wrong, just that since I'm kind of programmed as a person who wants to hit conflict head on and just eliminate it, I have a hard time understanding what advantage there is to just tucking it away and letting it fester. Some people really will go way out of their way to avoid conflict. They spare no expense. They'll take a different flight. They won't show up at the same event as the other person. And don't even mention that person's name at the dinner table. Funny thing is, like this current situation with my friend I just told you about, I think if we sat down and talked about it, and I could understand what it was that I accidentally said or did, and they could understand that it wasn't my intention, I think everything would be cleared up and we'd be all good again. Because I think the conflicts we have in our relationships are either subtle or huge misunderstandings that are just never addressed. And then, over time, they grow, and they grow, and they grow, and they blow up into something far bigger than ever was intended, way bigger than even the initial misunderstanding or the words that were said or whatever was done. Because the conflict-avoiding participants were just not willing to have a clarifying conversation. Ugh. So much unnecessary heartache, so much distress, so much stress and pain. My parents divorced when I was really young, right around the age of 3. And because of the divorce and because of the disability that my mom had, we moved away from my dad to be closer to my grandparents. So we moved maybe about a 3 hours drive from my dad. My dad, in the same season of life, was building a business. For any entrepreneurs out there, you know what it takes to build a business, and you know how easy it is to just get sucked into your business. It's like some kind of magnetic black hole, and you just forget to pick up your head and look around once in a while, especially if you don't have somebody there nudging you or gently reminding you. So throughout most of my younger years, my dad was just not there. And my mom, of course, well, she didn't have very good feelings about him because of how things ended up with the two of them. So from time to time, my brother and I would hear some, shall we say, less than good things about her ex, our dad. So I learned a little about this guy from those subtle messages my mom shared. And any remaining questions I had, which I didn't have answers for, well, I just kind of filled in the blanks. Of course, I really didn't know the answers, and I didn't realize at the time I was doing this. But hindsight is 20/20, of course, right? So without knowing who this dad person was, and having many, many questions that I needed answers for, looking back, I can honestly say, I made up the answers. I told myself that this dad person is not seeing me because he doesn't love me. He doesn't want to be a dad. You know, all the things that I didn't know, I just filled in the blanks. He's too busy having fun to see me. He's too busy traveling to want to see me or to spend time with me. He's too busy in general. He's enjoying his life selfishly, doing whatever he wants. And you know what? Maybe some of that was true. I mean, when you're building a business, you kind of need to be self-absorbed. It's kind of a 24/7, 365 days a year kind of gig. You don't get vacation time when you're building a business. You don't get time away. When there are customer issues and problems and you're the only one that can solve them, you take care of the customers. And I say that from personal experience because I'm doing the same thing right now, trying to build a business. And I have to keep reminding myself not to get so absorbed in the business and the goals that I want to accomplish that I forget the people around me. Because there are people in my family who also want to see me, who also need me to invest in them. So I can't just spend all my time in the business. I can't just hunker down and plan and strategize and figure out the marketing and the communication plans. No, I also need to invest in my son. I also need to spend time with my husband and invest in my marriage. I need to reach out to my friends. I need to carve out time to read my Bible and be with the Lord and pray for my friends and my family. They are all part of my journey. I don't really want to have a one-track mind and just do my business, because when this business has momentum and things are moving along well, I still want to have a family, and I still want to have my friends and my faith to enjoy life with. I don't want to have a successful business and no one to share it with. Well, anyway, my dad had really focused on his business, and I remember feeling so angry with him all the time because his business got all the attention that I wanted. I didn't call him Dad. I remember calling him by his first name. I didn't think he really had earned the dad title. And I remember feeling very frustrated with the entire relationship there. Communication with him was difficult. It was always strained. And often we ended up in some kind of argument where something hurtful was said. If it wasn't directly said, it was the tone or the frustration in the tone. I don't know. But it was not a good part of my life at that time. And if I had had the kind of personality to avoid conflict, I might have just stuffed it away and tried to forget about it. Sometimes that sounds tempting, but that's not who I am. One Christmas break, I was visiting my dad's parents, my grandparents on that side. I don't know. I think we were having coffee or, I don't know. I'd say a cup of coffee, but it was probably milk and cookies with my grandma. Anyway, I must have mentioned something about my dad and how difficult things were there, and she knew it. Everybody kind of knew it. But she said something to me I'll never forget. She said, "You know, Lisa, somebody has to go the extra mile. Somebody needs to take the first step." And in her very unemotional, dare I say stoic nature, which is consistent with her German heritage, that's all she said. But it was really powerful. Really powerful. And she was right. Somebody has to acknowledge that there is a problem. Someone has to step forward and say, hey, Houston, we have a problem. I don't know what the problem is, but I care about you more than I care about my own pride. I care about you and our relationship more than I care about being right or wrong, and I want to get this fixed. I want us to be fixed so we can be friends again, companions, family members, coworkers. Now, I know that you're listening out there going, yeah, right, Lisa, easier said than done. And I know that's true. It is easier said than done. I know because that's exactly what I did. I took my grandmother's advice. I was about 27 years old at the time. I had already started my career. I had already bought my first home. I was very self-sufficient and proud of that. I worked very hard in sales. I felt really confident in my own career path. I was used to calling on strangers. And in fact, I was very comfortable calling strangers because that's what I did every day in my job with all of my cold calling. So calling my dad kind of seemed like that. He seemed kind of like a stranger to me. But I was used to cold calling, so calling him seemed doable. I said, "Hey, Jim, this is your daughter. I'd like to set up dinner with you." And much to my surprise, he said, "That'd be great." With all the cold calls I had made in my sales job, you always celebrate when someone agrees and doesn't actually hang up the phone on you. So I was quite happy. So we set up dinner, and I will always and forever remember exactly what restaurant we went to and exactly what table we sat at. I won't forget that afternoon, ever. We sat down. The energy between us was tense, to put it mildly. It was cold, uncomfortable, uneasy, difficult. Neither of us really knew what to expect or what was about to happen. We sat down and did the pleasantries, and then I said something like, "Okay, Jim, I invited you to dinner because I'd like to have a do-over, a fresh start. I'd like us to start over. So if it's okay with you, I would like to tell you all the things that I'm really angry about and all the things that I'm really frustrated about, and maybe some of the things I even hate about our relationship. And then I'm going to shut up. I'm going to invite you to do the very same thing. I'd like to clear the air with you. And if you're willing, I'd like us to start over." So, keeping in mind that my dad and my mom divorced when I was 3, this was like 24 years later, with very few visits in between. We'd have occasional visits over Christmas break or maybe summer. But there wasn't much of a relationship built there. It was just what it was, I guess. So anyway, after setting the stage for the evening conversation, much again to my surprise, my dad agreed. So I began, and I told him all the things that had wedged themselves under my skin, the highlights and lowlights, I should say, from the last 23 years that had really hurt my soul as a daughter and frustrated me, angered me even as a person. And all of the conclusions I had made up in my own mind to fill in the blanks about this mysterious dad person who was never there. All the conclusions I had convinced myself about why he was doing one thing or another, why he wasn't doing one thing or another. And then I stopped. I paused and I said, "I think that's it. I'll be quiet now, and if you would, reciprocate, please, and let me know what's on your mind." And my dad paused for the longest time. I wasn't necessarily sure what was going to happen next. We had had some serious fights in the past. I figured we were in a public place, so I kind of thought we'd keep it tame. But I didn't know. I really didn't know. But as if in slow motion, I still remember my dad. He took his fork, set it down from dinner, took a sip of his drink, and then he looked at me with something I hadn't seen in his eyes, maybe ever. It was compassion. It was compassion. And after that long, suspenseful pause, he said, "Lisa, I never did those things that you're mad about because I never thought you wanted to hear from me. I never thought you wanted me in your life. I was not a good dad, and I just never thought that you wanted me there." And I was blown away. He didn't participate in my life because I didn't invite him to participate in my life. And maybe as a daughter, I shouldn't need to, but I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think we all have this tendency to assume that parents are superheroes of some sort and that they always know the right thing to do. I don't know, but think about it. If my dad was never taught how to handle conflict in this respect, or if he was never taught how to deal with a daughter, he was an only child. He didn't have any younger siblings to practice with or serve as an example for how to communicate. He had 2 German parents who were not great communicators, wonderful people, but just not really long on words. So how was he supposed to ever learn? How unfair of me to assume that he had all the answers. I certainly didn't have all the answers. I think people are always, maybe with a few exceptions, but I think people are always doing the very best and making or trying to make the best decisions they can in the moment with what they have. and with the health, the mental stability, and the time they've got. He wasn't trying to shut me out. He didn't intentionally leave me out of his life. He was a busy business owner, a busy business builder, and I can completely understand how it was easier for him to stay working with his clients and customers, problems he knew how to solve, than it was for him to try to crack this mystery code of how exactly to connect with his daughter. I can understand that completely. So we did a relationship reset, a bona fide do-over. And from that point on, we started, or rather restarted, our relationship. Now, I wish I could say it was all, awesome and great from that moment on. Of course it wasn't. I would say honestly, it took about 10 years until I was about 37 before I really started feeling close to this person and really feeling like I could authentically call him dad. And the key to our success and the game changer was this. And if you're listening or half listening and you've wandered away or gotten distracted, come back to me because this is important. I had to learn to love my dad for who he was and not who I wanted him to be. Let me say that again. I had to learn to love my dad for who he was and not who I wanted him to be. He was never going to be the all perfect, all amazing, leave it to Beaver dad that I thought maybe dreamed up in my head that a dad should be. That was just not his personality, nor his training or experience. That was not who he was. I would have to find that kind of a healthy, fatherly kind of role model in other people because that was just not my dad's personality. I had to learn to love him for who he was and not who I wanted him to be. And once that revelation hit me, I took every interaction with him as a blank slate. Every interaction, the phone call, the visit, whatever it was. If it wasn't a fight, if it didn't turn into an argument, then I considered it a win. In every connection with him, I expected nothing. I didn't expect him to hug me. I didn't expect him to ask about something in my life or to be present at an event I was involved in. I didn't expect him to give me loving, kind, fatherly wisdom or encouragement. No, I expected nothing. Sometimes I was surprised and I did have some beautiful conversations with him. And sometimes I just poured encouragement into him and asked him questions to learn more about him. And over time, we just let our friendship grow organically. In addition to giving my dad a blank slate with every single interaction, I would also look for ways. I would find ways to invite him to be part of my life. I was a homeowner at a pretty young age, and I was always pretty self-sufficient. I really loved tinkering with things, which I found out later was also something I got from my dad. But I liked tinkering with things, especially if I could save some money by learning how to do it myself. And I was working on fixing something one afternoon. I think I was in my laundry room, furnace room. I think it was the tile. Oh, yeah, no, it was the furnace. It was the furnace itself. I was fixing one of the tubings that came off the furnace. That's right. And I'd fixed it. I'd finished it. All the things apart on the floor and it was all messed up, all the tools, and everything laying on the floor. I got it all reconnected so it was working correctly and the furnace came back on and I was happy, proud of myself that I did it and saved myself a service fee. And I remember standing up thinking, shoot, I should have called my dad. I should have asked him for his advice. So guess what? I did. I did call my dad because my dad was very mechanical. He was brilliant with machines. He knew engines inside and out, and he would be able to picture that furnace without even seeing it. He would know exactly what was in it, exactly what was working, and if I told him the problem, he would know exactly how to fix it. So yeah, I called my dad, and I said, "Hey, Dad, I'm working on the furnace. It's not working. I got this loose tubing, and it's caused some kind of pressure leak in the furnace, and so I need to reconnect it, and I would just love your advice on it. What do you think?" I explained the whole situation to him, and he gave me the most fantastic explanation. He told me what he would do, and he gave me a couple different approaches to try. And one of them was actually one of the approaches I did. I just did it before I called him, but nuance. He was so tickled, and he was so happy that I had called for his advice. It made him feel valued, respected, and it was the light bulb I needed to know how to proceed. I was so glad I called him. And I authentically wanted to know his opinion. And truly, if he had given me an approach that was different than I had done, I would have definitely taken apart that furnace and done it his way. But that moment changed how I thought about him and us moving forward. From that moment on, just remembering how tickled and excited and happy he was to have been called, I looked for ways to involve him and moments that I could call him just to ask for input and ideas, or, hey, what do you think about this? Or, what would you do with this particular question or this decision I need? What would you do? Even when I didn't need it. The question was no longer about getting an answer. The question was an opportunity, a chance to build a relationship with him, and for him to feel valued and part of my life. And that was huge. It was so huge. It was huge because I learned so much from him. And I learned so much about him. Things that I never would have learned just sitting down trying to have a conversation. That wasn't his personality. I learned from him from hearing the excitement in his voice and getting to know his heart of wanting to help me and wanting to be part of my life. I was pretty self-sufficient back then. I could have done just about anything on my own. I grew up really independent because with my mom being sick and disabled, I was on my own a lot and just kind of forced to figure it out. And turns out I had that gene from my dad that loved to figure things out and tinker with things. So this reset with my dad really forced me to look for ways to invite my dad in. But it also gave us opportunities to talk about things we never would have talked about otherwise. Now, this whole process might be different if you're dealing with someone at the office. You can't necessarily do the same process with someone there, but you can, with humility, ask for input from a coworker maybe that you're having a struggle with, or how they might approach a particular problem that you're trying to solve. Or even if you don't agree with what they suggest, you might be surprised at just how powerful asking for their input will be, just to help them feel honored, respected, and it might help soften the tension between the two of you. So the good news, really the most amazing news about this whole story with my dad, is that little by little, baby step by baby step, we got to know each other. And I need to back up just a little bit because what you need to know is my frame of mind as a young teen. I knew as a teenager I'd never have a relationship with this person who was called my dad. I knew I'd never have a dad to walk me down the aisle at my wedding, and I thought that it was really possible that he might not even be at the wedding. But you know what? After 10 years of slowly taking small steps to get to know each other, with heaping piles of patience, heaping piles of grace and forgiveness, keeping expectations really low and celebrating any day that was good, we really did develop a great father-daughter friendship. And you know what? No, he never became that perfect dad that I dreamt up in my head. But you know what? He was the best dad he knew how to be. And I learned how to love him for who he was, not for who I wanted him to be. And after 11 years, 11 years or so after we reset that relationship, after that pivotal dinner that we had where we reset our relationship, well, I met the most amazing man, the love of my life, my now husband. John and I got engaged. John met my dad, and yes, I called him Dad, and my dad proudly walked me down the aisle, and much to my amazement, was seriously, well, aside from my husband, of course, but my dad was one of the most surprising and magical parts of my wedding. Mind-blowing. Why? because I had no clue that my dad was a ballroom dancer. Holy cats! He danced me gracefully around that beautiful ballroom dance floor with dignity and class. His face was beaming as he held me tight and guided me around that dance floor. That picture, that moment, is one of my most favorite moments from our wedding. Me and my dad in the middle of a beautiful waltz on the dance floor, dancing together at my wedding. That picture, in my mind, is the culmination of a lot of grace, a lot of forgiveness, and both of us being willing to try. Both of us being willing to face potential conflict and try. If Grandma hadn't reminded me to have courage and humility, if she hadn't told me to step out and be willing to take the first step, be willing to go the extra mile, and to eat a big old fat piece of humble pie, to choose that something else, in this case, my dad and my relationship, was more important than my pride and then being right, and then asking my dad to have a relationship reset. Wow, that's the best thing I could have ever done. Best thing. Absolutely the best. This coming Monday, here in the US, we celebrate Memorial Day. And on that day, we pause to remember the many courageous and selfless men and women who have lost their lives fighting on behalf of our country and those of us who live here, fighting for the freedoms that we all get to enjoy. But Memorial Day will be a day of remembrance for me in another way. About 3 years ago, my dad got cancer, and he passed away 2 years ago on Memorial Day. I think that's exactly how he would have wanted it if he had had the ability to plan it all out himself. The whole country will be there to forever remind me the day Dad left this world. And hopefully, it was also the day he entered into his eternal home in heaven. On my wedding day, my dad was able to be there for me. He made so many little details extra special, for which I am so grateful. And 2 years ago on Memorial Day, I had the great honor to be right by his side when he took his very last breath in this world. I was there to be able to pray with him and comfort him and hopefully do my part to make so many little details in those final hours and minutes just a little more comfortable for him. The best part about all of this, my friend, is I have zero regrets about the relationship with my dad. Zero. Well, maybe one. Maybe. I maybe wish I would have done it sooner. You know, I finally had the courage at age 27 to reach out to this person called my dad and ask him for a relationship do-over, some kind of a father-daughter mulligan. Tee it up, Dad, let's try this again. But it would have been great if I could have done it at age 20. I would have had 7 more years with him. I don't think I had the skills or the self-confidence at 20. And yeah, I think I needed that grandma talk. I think I needed the grandma talk before I was able to even realize that I should have that conversation. But that might be my only regret, that I didn't do it sooner. Knowing my dad and knowing the man he was, again, not the man I wanted him to be, but knowing and loving him for the man he was, is one of my most beautiful treasures on this earth. I got to really know him. I had the chance to fill in a lot of the blanks with actual, factual answers, not the ones that I had made up myself. I learned that Dad had a hard life. Quite a hard life. He was also, in my mind, some kind of superhero. He worked in the intelligence area in the Air Force during the war. All sorts of things he said he couldn't tell me about. But then he'd grin. That grin, the grin that only he could grin. I would never have known those things about him. And the things I learned about him helped me learn more about myself too. But I had to give him the benefit of the doubt and allow him the opportunity to start again. Yeah, relationships are hard. They end up showing us who we are. it's kind of like some aged mirror that's kind of fogged over a little bit. And the longer we look at that broken relationship, the more we focus in on it, the more we see the stubborn, pride-filled person we are. And we start to realize that every relationship takes two people. And as Ida said, with such grace and such conviction and quiet German strength, someone has to go the extra mile, and someone has to be willing to take the first step. So, my friend, who do you need to reach out to today? Let me tell you, no conflict is better than reconciliation. No strife is preferred over peace. Being right is not worth a severed relationship. Humility is a powerful tool when used with love and grace, patience and forgiveness. Maybe you have a relationship that needs a reset. I just want to invite you today, give them a call, send them an email or a text. Ask them for a relationship reset. You might be really surprised about the information you get when you start addressing the miscommunications and the conclusions that you've told yourself are real. You might be surprised to find out they're not, and that the other person would love to have a relationship with you also. So give that person a call today, text them, email them, ask them for a relationship reset. You will be so glad you did. Thank you so much for listening or watching today. And if you are listening only to the audio, I'll just remind you can watch the episodes also on YouTube. Also, if you haven't done it yet, please subscribe right here wherever you're listening or watching this episode. Thank you for being a faithful listener. Please share this with your family and friends, and I will look forward to seeing you again next week, right back here. God bless you and have a great week.